Great, then I think we're live. So I'll just make sure it's working on the YouTube.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, welcome everyone to this webinar with Dr. Amina Yonis and Litmaps. We're so excited to get started in just a few seconds here. We'll just make sure everything's working correctly and then we'll dive in. Wonderful. Then we'll go ahead and get started. So this is one of our literature review webinars. So with Litmaps, we host these once in a while to try and support the community in learning about literature review and Litmaps, as well as some other topics. Today, we're really lucky to have Dr. Amina Yonis. So I'll just do a quick introduction, and then she's going to take it away and give you an awesome uh, overview of the literature review process, how to use Litmaps, and some other really interesting stuff. So Dr. Yonis has a PhD from 2017 in cancer and cell biology. So she has this really powerful research background, but she pairs that with a huge amount of knowledge about education, students, what that environment looks like. And in 2020, so that's now 5 years ago, she founded the Page Doctor. And by now it's helped over 1 million students in mentorship, career support, just a ton of stuff apparently. So I'm sure Dr. Yonis can mention that at the end at some point, but definitely check it out online. And you might already recognize her from social media. So she covers so many things in research, especially tons of modern tools. And that's why I'm really happy to have her here because I think I will learn a lot. Because when you're working with many different research tools, you can actually see them with their own perspective, see where do they fit into your broader workflow. And especially today, when we have dozens of new tools coming out constantly and newer AI models, all these different things. So Dr. Yonis has this awesome perspective, and I'm really glad that she can bring this to Litmaps and explain to you what that looks like, and especially in your particular research process. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get started. Let me just remind everyone, you're welcome to drop in the chat. You can introduce yourself and talk to one another, maybe mentioning if you're a student or professor, your institution, and that kind of thing. And you're also welcome to drop any questions in there, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, Amina. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I've used Litmaps for such a long time, so it's such a pleasure to be here, sharing with you guys how to supercharge your literature review and write 10 times faster using Litmaps. And also, I'll be mentioning a few other AI tools towards the end as well that can complement your experience. So let me just share my screen with you so you can see the presentation. Thank you so much, Marina, for the introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Dr. Amina Yonis, and I talk about everything to do with AI, how to use AI ethically, and I think that's really the key word that I want to emphasize in today's session and just in general when using AI. Everything that I mentioned in today's session is ethical use, and kind of allows you to use AI in a way that you will not get in trouble with your university. You're not crossing any boundaries. Everything that I'll be showing you today using Litmaps will be kind of processes that will help you be more productive and find literature faster. So if you see this QR code over here, please feel free to scan the QR code. This takes you to the Litmaps website, so you can sign up for a free account and you can kind of go through the process with me as I talk you through the kind of the process of writing a literature review and finding literature. So hopefully that'll be useful. Ask any questions. Towards the end, I'll have a Q&A session. So if there's anything that you want to know, please do ask later on. So the contents for today's session will be firstly, I'll be looking at what is a literature review, like what are the main stages, like how would I break this down? Secondly, looking at what is Litmaps exactly. You may have never heard of it before, or you might have used it a lot, but not necessarily know exactly what it can do for you. So I'll be kind of introducing it a little bit here. Then I'll be going through each stage one by one and showing you kind of how you can use Litmaps or other AI tools to help you for those processes. So that will be planning the review, then actually finding papers, reading and organizing your sources, understanding the research papers that you found, and then actually writing the literature review. And then I'll be looking at kind of common pitfalls and then concluding it with a Q&A. So lots to cover today, not much time. So hopefully we can get through this. And by the end of the session, you'll feel really confident in knowing how to get your literature and find everything using Litmaps. Okay, so what are these stages? So there are 5 main stages that I'd like to break down a literature review into. If you miss a stage, what can happen is you end up having to kind of go back a little bit and fill those gaps in. So when you're kind of conducting a literature review, make sure you follow these stages in order. So the first is the planning stage. This is where you define the scope of the literature review. What is your topic? What are your keywords? What is the research question? A lot of people have to write a review and go straight to trying to find papers before they've defined what are the keywords that I actually need to know. What are the boundaries of this literature review? What am I looking at and what am I not looking at? So it's really important to take some time in this first stage to just define those things, write them down, and have them as a bit of a guide. Then a second step is to do your research, of course, and this is where you find the papers that are relevant. Using traditional tools like pre-AI, like Google Scholar, things like that, they work well, but they they mean that you have to spend a lot more time trying to find and dig to just be able to find things that are relevant. But using AI tools like Litmaps, you're able to find these research papers a lot quicker by creating your own Litmap, which I'll show you shortly. The third stage is reading. So this is where you pick out those papers that you think are relevant and you analyze them and you organize them and you create folders or you create kind of sections that are organized that allow you to then say, right, these 5 are going to constitute my introduction. The next 10 papers are going to be the main first chapter. The next 10 are the second chapter, and you keep on going. And that all comes in the reading process. Then number 4 is where you synthesize your findings. You kind of make sure you understand everything. You identify some research gaps that you can kind of speak about in the review. And then the 5th stage is writing and actually getting everything together to that final 2,000 word, 3,000 word, 4,000 word mark. And this is the structure. Always follow this from stage 1 to stage 5. Now, let's look at Litmaps, who of course is the host of today's session. So what is Litmaps? So I'll just quickly show you the slide and then I can take you to the actual website itself. So there's a few things, quite a few things that Litmap does to be able to support you on this journey. So the first is that you can search. Now think of Litmaps as a bit of a Google search, but for academic literature. So you've got your search bar, you can type in keywords, you can type in authors, you can type in IDs of literature that you might know, and then you can then go ahead and find other papers from that point. You can then dive even deeper. So once you have a paper that you say, you know what, this is a really good one, how can you then create a Litmap? How can you then create a kind of graph of papers that are all related? It allows you to visualize. So as I'll show you shortly, you'll be able to like annotate your articles, label them, and do really cool creative things that are really impressive. You're also able to kind of stay ahead of the curve. So you can monitor and you can get alerts for when new research papers pop up that are relevant to your Litmap. And you can also collaborate really well. So you're able to share your findings and share kind of what you've been looking at with colleagues and other people that you might be working with. So it's really, really cool. It really allows you to, in a quite wholesome way, search for papers, kind of really deep, dive deep to find related papers without having to do too much of a crazy search, and then have like a nice organized structure of everything. Do, get your citations and then start to write. So this is amazing. Okay, so stage 1, and this is the stage where you plan your literature review. Now, I'm just going to quickly share my screen with you. 1 second. Okay. So what I'd like you to do before I go to stage one, because I really want this session to be quite active on your part and not just passively like watching me. So if you could, as I begin to continue to speak, if you could go on to Litmaps, we can leave the link in the chat. Go on to Litmaps, and then if you can just log in, make a free account, and as I speak about the different stages, I want you to think about what your keywords are, and as I say, this is stage one, this is what we're going to do, I want you to do it as well. So by the end of the session, not only do you understand how to actually do the literature search and write a review, but you'll also have been able to actually create your own lit map, which is amazing. So please do use the next couple of minutes to just jump onto Litmaps, make a free account, takes a few seconds. Then we'll start to go through the process yourself, and hopefully you'll create your own personalized map by the end of the session. Okay, so stage one is planning your literature review. So as I mentioned, there's a few different parts that comes into this. So here you want to define your research question. So this is where you want to really say, this is my topic, and this is the specific area of research that I am looking at. So you're able to use your maps, your lit maps, to identify what are some papers in your field that are important, what are who are the key authors, which journals do my research area usually publish in, and this is where you're really refining the question. Then you want to also refine your keywords. And I always say this when I speak about searching for research papers. The papers you find are only going to be as good as your keywords are. And as specific as your keywords are. So you need to really refine your keywords. So as you create your lit maps and as you start looking at the research papers that come up in search, look at the keywords that are presented to you to then say, okay, every paper has this word. This should be one of the words that I keep as a keyword in my kind of bank when I'm searching for papers. Then you can also set your scope by kind of filtering down. So you can decide on like the year and different like filters that allow you to kind of be more specific on which group of research papers you're looking at. So let's look at how to do that specifically. So what I'd like you to do, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if we can just go to your Litmap page. So this is like the home page. So the first thing we're going to do is search using keywords. So we want to search using keywords, titles, or authors. So I've given an example. I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again for you to see. So I've given the example of the ethics of genetic engineering. So let me just copy. These are my keywords. I can even take out the. So ethics of genetic engineering. I can go into a bit more depth, but I think for now, just as an example, I think this would be a good example. So now I'm going to search. For you, can you please input your keywords, 3, 4, up to 5 keywords that describe or are the basis and foundation of your research? Okay, so as you can see, I just input these keywords, and there's a lot that I can kind of do and a lot that I can kind of modify. So at the moment, I have no lit map because I haven't started the process yet. I'm just beginning the search. So I can firstly, as I said, I can look at the keywords within these research papers. So they all have the word ethics for the most part. They all have the word ethics, which is good. That means it's a good word to keep as a keyword. They all have the words genetic engineering. Okay. And then I can see that there are other keywords that are within this. So for example, and transgenics, in animal or of animals. This is teaching. This is genetic engineering. So I'm starting to pull out a few specifics when it comes to keywords. So, start to write that down and say, actually, ethics is a good word, genetic engineering is another good word, and actually maybe I'll look at I don't know, and in animals, so animals specifically, right? So this is where I'm starting to really hone down what my keywords are in my paper. Then I can say, okay, let me maybe filter it down a little bit more. So I want to, let me say, I think since this is a little bit too recent, there's probably not going to be a huge amount since this year. So let me just say 2021. I can go to custom, so I can search for a specific year, but I'm just going to say 2021 because I think that's a good couple of years of research papers. So I can wait and see what pops up. And then I'm going to select an article. And then this will kind of form the basis of what will come up from there. So as I can see, I've got design, genetic engineering, improving risk governance. So this is actually really interesting because as you can see, there's only really 2 research papers here, which suggests that it hasn't been that much that has been published in this research area, which as I said, could suggest that maybe this is a good gap in literature. That's something that I can look at. So let's go with most relevant because I want to pick something that has a lot of references. So maybe we can go with, let's go with this one. Okay, so we're going to go with this one. So I'm going to select this paper as the one that I'm going to go for. And I'm going to say explore related articles on a new Litmap, right? So this is going to be my main paper. Okay. So it's going to generate a Litmap. And that's essentially the first step. So you can see that it's going to start to form this map. I'll show you in the next few sections what these axes mean and how you can modify them. But we're starting now to go through the search of loads of references, loads of citations, and generate this list of related articles. Now, what would I have done traditionally? I would have found one research paper and then maybe gone to like the references list, found papers that they have cited, gone to those, gone to the next reference list, and I would have spent ages just going through reference lists. But this makes it a much easier for me to do. So let's move on to the next part. So hopefully, if you're doing this at home, you have your own lit map that you've created from just searching for a few keywords and trying to like filter down the dates. And then I'm going to rename this and I'm going to say ethics lit review. Okay. So you can create different maps for different things and different tasks that you have. Okay, so that's kind of step 1. So now I've set my scope. I know my keywords. I've got a good question. I'm going to move on. Step 2 is actually finding relevant papers. So this is where the lit map comes into play. So what can you do? So the paper that I showed you earlier, the paper that I selected, is essentially my seed paper, which is the main paper that we are going to go with, from which the lit map will be created. So what it does is it generates a network of related works. So based off of that paper that I've said, actually, that's a really relevant paper, there'll be a network of other papers that are related in different ways, and we'll look at what those different ways are. And that will help you to discover new papers. So as I said, normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to find a paper, go to the reference list, kind of find another one, then save that, then go to that reference list and keep on going backwards. And it just takes forever. But this really helps you. And then as you're reading and as you're like looking through the abstracts and saying, oh, this is a really good one, this will work really well, you can then tag them and save them within different categories and organize them. So let's take a look at how that part could work. So as I showed you earlier, you have this beautiful looking lit map, which I actually think that I can show you towards the end. But once you've like labeled them, tagged everything, and you have a really nice looking lit map, you can actually save this and add it into like your methods. For example, if you're doing like a systematic review, or if you're doing a dissertation where you have to find literature, this is a really nice looking image that you can show as an example of how you found and how you search for literature. So you can download this. I believe it's this one, export figure. Yeah. You can actually download this as an image and include that in your thesis, which I think is fantastic. So if I just go back. Yeah, so where's my I lost it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here is my lit map. So what can I do? I can now say, right, I have different axes. So I have more citations on the y-axis and I have more recently published on the x-axis. So if I look at these ones on this side, they're the ones that have been published more recently. So that's good to know because I would prefer papers that have been published more recently. So I can say, let me add this one, let me take a look at this one. And I can actually click on one of them. And when I click on it, I get a summary, which is really good. So it tells me what journal it's been published in. It tells me the abstract, it gives me the abstract, so I'm able to read it. I'm able to get the citation. If I want to then say, actually, I like this one, let me add this to my notes, my planning, whatever it is, I can get the citation really easily, really quickly. And there's so many other things that I can do here. As I said, you can tag them as well. So you can say, I want to tag this paper as this will be good for my introduction. Let me tag that as an introduction paper. This is also really good as a critical, let's say it's quite critical. It's got some critical discussion. And I can say, okay, I'm going to tag it as having some critical discussion. So then I can say, let me add, it's going to create the tag because this is a new tag. So it's going to create the tag and add that as a new tag as well. So you can see that as you're reading, you can build. And I've tried a lot of different AI tools, as you guys probably know if you follow me on my social media. And one of the main issues that I have with most of them is that once you've found papers, how do you then organize? A lot of the time it's, finding papers is not a problem, but then it's the organization. And then how do I then go from finding papers to organizing to then using that organization to write? And this is really useful, being able to then say, this is a paper that I like, and I'm going to use it in this section and this section. So I've tagged them. So then now when I come to write, look at how easy it will be to just go to my tag and say, these are the papers that I'm going to use for my introduction, So I think that's really, really powerful. And you should definitely use that as a way to organize, which we'll speak about in the next section. In the next section, it's hard to not show you everything because it's a really cool platform that I've been using quite a lot recently. But yeah, so hopefully, again, as you are doing this yourself, you're able to pick out papers that are relevant to you, and you're able to kind of see what that map looks like. Feel free to tag them. You can use whatever label you like. Whatever makes sense to you, really, is what makes sense. And then, yeah, so then this on the right-hand side, so the y-axis and the x-axis. So what you can do is, if you click here, so you can see that if I hover over more citations or more recently published, let's just do this one. If I click onto it, you can see that you can firstly understand what's happening. Again, I love how Litmaps makes it really clear what everything is. So it's not a secret, because you would have to explain what these are. If you add this into, let's say, your dissertation as a figure, you should write down what these axes mean. So it's really clear what this means. You can also change to linear scale. But yeah, you can change it to the ref counts, so references. You can change it to the publication date, so you can see what the date. You can see these are published later. I want to change it. You can do momentum. So momentum is essentially papers that might be old or younger, but are still being cited by other papers. So regardless of whether it's 10 years old or 2 years old, if it's being cited, it's still relevant today, which is really cool. And then connectivity. So there's loads of other things that you can kind of play around with, and you can play around with the y-axis and the x-axis, depending on what you prefer. So you can really see how even in this just the second stage where you're finding papers, you can begin to find papers that are the most relevant, that have a high ref count, so those that have been have that use loads of references. So for example, these would be like review articles, for example, or a higher citation count, which I tend to look at that personally. Even before AI, I'd always manually look at how many papers that paper has been cited by, which would help me just kind of see like how relevant it is essentially. But this is really cool because it does it for you automatically. So that's great. So yeah, that's sort of the second step. And in just, I mean, I've been speaking for maybe 15, 20 minutes. In just that time, I've been able to already search for literature, identify the best keywords, create a really nice looking lit map that presents me with the most relevant papers for my field specifically. And I've also started to organize into different sections. In this case, introduction, critical discussion, but I can really go into so much more detail. Okay, so that's the second stage. Then we're moving on to stage 3, and this is where you read and you organize your sources. So I kind of touched upon it before, and a lot of the literature review process overlaps quite a bit. I've obviously broken it down into stages to make it easy for you to understand, but when you actually are doing this and when you're actually processing this, it's hard to just not read as you go along. You're reading from the beginning. You're organizing from the beginning. So all of this kind of overlaps, but these are the distinct stages. So what you want to do is, now that you have your lit map, and now we want to really carefully begin to create a structure. When you're writing a literature review, you have your introduction, then you have obviously your main body, and you have your conclusion. Within the main body, you need to follow a bit of a structure. So you need to kind of go from quite general, so broad areas of your topic, to more specific and really going down into the gap in literature. So this is my topic area. This is what we know. We also know this. We also know a bit of this, but we don't quite know this. We don't understand this. And here is where the gap is, right? So we're going really narrow. So what we can do is, as you're reading your papers, as you're finding the literature that's appropriate, you can start to create collections. And these collections can be, as I said, you're tagging them based off of these are the appropriate papers that are good for general knowledge. These are good for this particular protein. These are good for that particular idea or theory or case study or whatever it is that you're doing. So now when you begin to write, as I said earlier, it's just a lot easier for you. I also mentioned this as well. You can have alerts. So then when new papers are added into your collection, it's very easy to get alerted about this. And you can also annotate. So again, I'll show you this in a second. But you can annotate the papers, so you can label them with different like colors and shapes. Again, this is unique. This is really unique to Litmaps. And I think this is really, really helpful as well. And you can then sync these libraries that you have, that you've created, the Litmaps that you have created. You can sync them with Zotero. Zotero is a citation manager. So it's similar to something like Mendeley, or like OneNote, for example. So you can automatically sync everything to keep that all up to date. Again, I think this is a really fantastic capability. Again, kind of without comparing directly to other tools that I've played around with, one of the main limitations with using AI tools to help you with literature is that the link between finding the paper and then adding it to your library a lot of the time is missing. So what you have to do is manually say, oh, here's a good paper. Let me add it to my whatever tool you're using, your citation manager. But in this case, what's really cool is that you can automatically kind of sync them together. So if you use Zotero, or even if you don't use Zotero, if you haven't chosen what to use and you want to use Litmaps, you might as well use Zotero because it can be a nice and easy connection for you. So again, let's take a look at how you can do this. So I hope that you guys are following along. I really hope that you are doing this yourself. So you have a nice looking lit map just like me. Oh yeah, you can kind of play around with this as well to make it look a bit, a bit nicer or more spread out, whatever. Um, and yeah, so as you can see, I have this. Looks good. I think it has a nice structure. I can understand what's going on. But let's say I find this paper, I say, okay, I like this paper, I think this is a good one. What I can do is, oops, what I can do is, first obviously I can shuffle it around. Let me move this. Um, yeah, so I can obviously shuffle it around. What I can do is I can start to modify its appearance, as I mentioned. So here with this tool, whoops, with this tool, I can then label. So I can say, let's say, let's say 0.1. Okay, so that's 0.1, which is I'm just writing a random number or write random label. 0.1 is the first thing that I'm going to speak about in my literature review. Okay. I'm then going to also, oops, I'm then going to also say, just because I want to stand out and I want to be really clear. And also, like, as I said, you might want to use this for your methods, or you might want to use this as part of your dissertation in whatever section. So if it's really well labeled, then it's even better. Then you in your caption, you can write purple is this, yellow means this, orange is for this. And if it's systematically done, then it's obviously a lot better. So I can label, so you can see that if I change the colors, and I think this looks really nice. So you can really start to see how much you can personalize your map. So it's not just a matter of a list has been created and you have a random map. It's actually a map that you have then said are the papers that you have pulled out, you've understood, and are most relevant to you. Um, Another thing that I can do is I can say, okay, let's say I like, I'm going back to this paper again. Let's say I like this paper. I can say that I want more like this paper. So I can say, actually, I want more just like this paper. And then when it's searching for a new paper similar, it can say, actually, there are new results that are available to you. So it can continue to tailor and continue to build your research library based off of kind of what you are and how you are refining it and what you find useful. So I could say refresh, and you'll see that it will form another a lit map that is refined for me. If you have any questions, please don't forget to ask so I can answer them afterwards for you. So the Zotero is here, so you can sync, and you can also import as well if you have any papers that you want to import. Okay, so now based off what I just said, so I said I want more papers that are similar to this, the one I mentioned, the one I showed earlier, similar to that, then it can create a new lit map for me that's based off of that. So you can see how I'm starting to build this. I mentioned this earlier, but you can also filter your lit maps and the research papers based off of the dates, keywords, author names, journals, H index, so many things. And like, the more that you constrict and the more that you are specific on what you want in your lit map, then the better your results will be. And this is something that you can't do using PubMed or Google Scholar. So this is really unique and a new capability with AI tools. Okay. So now that I have pulled out all my research papers, I've got a good list, I've tagged them, I've organized everything. I have started to say, I'm building what my research paper will look like, what my literature review will look like. The next stage is actually understanding and synthesizing everything. Because so far, you may not have actually read the research paper yet. You may have just read abstracts. You may be looking at citation number. You may be looking at kind of other characteristics of the research paper. But now you need to actually read the paper to understand it. So how do you read papers? What are the things that you should be looking for? So let's say this is what the kind of output looks like when you look at the research papers. Some things that you need to look at are the date, of course. So you need to be aware of how recent a paper is. Depending on your subject area, this matters less or more. If you're in like you're something like my PhD was like cancer research, let's say. So 5 years ago, something that was published 5 years ago may be irrelevant because things move really quickly. There may be new findings, there may be new understandings. So I would want to look at something that was a bit more recent than, for example, 5 years ago. But in another research area where you're looking at maybe theories or things that don't necessarily change as much, then 5 years ago is absolutely fine, right? So it really depends on your subject area. So make sure that you maybe speak to someone who is aware of this. Then look at the title. So I mentioned keywords, but you want to go back and look at the title and say, this title is relevant to what I'm actually going to be writing about. And then, of course, you have the abstract, which matches up with the title. It should be clear. You have your citation count, which tells you how many times the paper has been cited, and also how many references does the paper have itself. Then you can get the citation for the paper, which I showed you earlier. So let's say I want to use this and I want to take it somewhere else. I can get the citation in the right format straight away, which is really good. And then I can also read the paper. So you can say get PDF. And if you go to get PDF, you'll be able to read the paper. I believe you have to log in if you have a university login to be able to access papers that have a paywall behind them. But if you don't, then you can read the PDF there. And then obviously the tags, I showed you this earlier. So that's what you're kind of looking at when you're wanting to read a paper. So when you're looking at reading, you want to identify trends is the first thing. Try to figure out what different trends are within your research area. So maybe think about, okay, let me look at the timeline of what's been published. And if you change an axis to the date, you can say, oh, look, 10 years ago, we were talking about this. 5 years ago, we were looking at this. And now the last 2, 3 years, we've been looking at this theory. So you're able to kind of identify different patterns based off of the timeline. And other things that you can map connections. So this is where you're able to look at different papers and how they cite each other to understand kind of relationships between different authors or maybe different like research groups and things like that. And then maybe look for orphan papers. So this is really interesting because I get this question a lot where people ask, what if there just aren't any papers? Like what if what I'm looking at doesn't have that much research out there? So it's at this stage where you can say, actually, I found 1 or 2 papers that really don't have much else. So maybe there's a link from this to something else. Maybe this is a research area that we should be looking at, or it's not understood, but why? Like, what is the missing gap? And it's at this stage where you're synthesizing information. And when I read literature reviews or dissertations, I can tell when someone has gone beyond just finding papers and sticking it into a piece of text, and when they've actually been able to map and find gaps and understand things properly. So there's a few more things here as well to help you with that. So if I just go back to the lit map. So let's just say I'm going to go back to this paper. So here, this is the one that I was showing you earlier. This is the journal, which is important to note when you're reading. Is it relevant to your research area? This is the author. So if you click on the author, you can see different things. This is a title. I can tag, I can tag it with different tags. Let's just say introduction. Um, and then here's the abstract, which is good. And then this was the site one. I can change style. These are all the classic different styles. And then I can get PDF. So it's at this stage I mentioned to you earlier. Sometimes if there is a free version of the paper, sometimes there are, then it's you'd be able to read it. But otherwise, you need to log in with your university login to get access to the paywall. So that's just bear that in mind. Um, and yeah, if I want to start a new lit map, let's say I really like this paper that I'm reading, and I'm like, you know what? I want to see what this paper is related, like what relations and what connections I can make to this paper. I can then create a brand new lit map and explore what that looks like on a new lit map. And on the flip side, if I say, actually, this is completely irrelevant to what I am looking at, I can remove it from my lit map. Yeah, I was playing around with this quite a lot the past couple of months, ever since like, maybe even more than that, but specifically the past couple of months. And it's amazing how much you can personalize your lit map. And it's sometimes when you look at this, you think it's been done for you and you're stuck with the structure. But actually, you can delete, you can add, you can say more like this, you can tag, you can organize, and you can really create a literature like review library that then can formulate your literature review essentially. And then from here, all you'll have to do is begin to say, right, now I'm going to add this into this section and actually begin to write. Um, I also wanted to introduce one or two other tools that can help you after this point. So once you've found your research papers, you can use a tool, for example, like Unriddle. Here are some others that do a similar job that help you to understand research papers. So obviously Litmaps help you find that perfect library, identify the 20 perfect research papers for you. And now if you want to make the next stage faster, you can upload your research paper to something like Unriddle or Hamata and ask questions about it. So that's an option. It's like a complementary AI tool. Stage 5, last but not least, definitely not least. This is the writing stage. So this is where you actually begin to write the literature review. And let me tell you something. I know that it seems like the writing is the harder part, but the writing is easy if step 1 to 4 has been done correctly. If you have identified the best papers, organized it correctly, found a good gap in literature. When you come to write, it's just a matter of putting it together. I know I make it sound easier than than it actually is, but trust me, if you do the last bits right, this part is easy. So how do we do this? So step 1 is outline your sections. So I mentioned this earlier, but when you're tagging, make it really clear what those sections are. So as you're reading, you should be able to kind of say, I'm going to have a section about point 1, I'm going to have a section about 2, and I'm going to have a section about 3 and 4. So as you're reading the research papers, start to tag them appropriately. So this is section 1, this is section 2. So then now you're writing, you can just begin to add those points into it. And then I mentioned citations. Of course, make sure that you're always citing. So this is where you're able to very quickly use the site, but also use Zotero if you want to begin to export that onto a citation manager. But you can also export it somewhere else if you want to use another tool. And then, of course, you want to think about gaps in literature when you're writing and citations. And a complementary AI tool that I'd recommend is PaperPal. And this is a really useful tool that allows you to get feedback as you write. So let's say you've picked out all of your you've picked out your sections, you've begun to write, you're adding citations, you've written your gap, you've really tailored that literature review to make it perfect. You can now get some feedback where you're using PaperPal to you've uploaded your writing on PaperPal, and then you can ask the AI tool called AI Review. You can say, can you give me some feedback on I don't know, you can say check the flow and the structure, for example, or can you give me feedback on the introduction? How can I improve this introduction? Then they would give you it would take a look at your work and it would say you need more information on your context. You need a clear research gap. You need more specific examples and evidence and things like that. So it's a nice complementary tool that you can use a lot after you have found all the papers within your research area. And then once you've finished writing, you can come to the Page Doctor. And you probably have heard of it if you follow me on my platforms. And this is my it's not an AI tool. Actually, there's no AI within it. But we will look at what you've written and we can give you tailored feedback or consultation to be able to support you with perfecting it before you actually submit. So you can scan this if you want to come and check us out. If not, you can just follow us on our Instagram because we have loads of kind of helpful top tips on there as well. So some pitfalls and that you might experience whilst writing a literature review and how Litmaps can help you. I hope that I've been able to show you in the last sort of 45 minutes how much you can transform the literature review process in just like, let's just say 45 minutes. In just 45 minutes, you've seen me from beginning, from just keywords, you've seen me find relevant papers, create my own personalized lit map, organize my literature, begin to read, and that's in less than 1 hour. You've actively seen me do that, and hopefully you've also been able to do something as well as I've been speaking to you. So it's completely transformative in how much time it actually saves when it comes to finding literature, but also the fact that you can find quality literature. So you're not just spending 6, 7 hours and not finding anything relevant. So some of the main things that I find when I have meetings with students and I speak to students as well is firstly, they miss key papers. It's very common. I'm reading a literature review and I'm like, I know there should be this paper in here. Why is it not here? Because if you haven't done the right search or you haven't used the right tools, it can very easily happen. But obviously with Litmaps, it's not a manual search. You are selecting a relevant paper, and then the rest of the lit map that's created for you is looking across the board. So it's going to make sure that you have coverage of all the papers that are out there and that are most relevant to you. And the second thing is, again, this is a very common one, getting overwhelmed. I've read 1,000 papers. I'm reading 5 papers a day. I don't understand it. I don't have organization. What can I do with them? What should I had this question the other day where someone asked me, after I read, what do I do to the papers? Like, where does it go? This is exactly what you can do on Litmaps. You can organize by tagging and by also like using the kind of labels as well that make sure that once you've read it and once you've understood it, you can categorize it somehow. And like I said, I think that's really unique and it's something that Litmaps offers that other AI tools don't offer. And then the third pitfall is the sources being outdated. One of the most common bits of feedback that I give, again, is this is an old paper. In your introduction, you shouldn't be referencing 1993. It's old. That's not relevant to today. Like it needs to be, if you're speaking about a literature review, that's a review of your literature and it's looking at what has been published up to this date that's relevant to your topic. If you're referencing things from 20, 30 years ago, that's not relevant to your topic today, unless nothing has been published since then, which I highly doubt. So I always say this, give me a new source. Like that is my most common feedback in the introduction. Add a source here that's published in the last 5 years. So again, with Litmaps, what you're able to do is set up alerts to keep you current and make sure that you're getting new papers, but also you can filter. So when you're doing the search, when you're creating your lit map, you can say, give me papers that are between this date and that date. So you're sure that whatever you pull out is not going to be old, but it's still relevant. So that's the key thing. So these are the kind of key issues that I commonly see when it comes to writing a literature review, and all of them can be solved using Litmaps, which is fantastic. So I think we've reached the end of the session. I really hope that you were able to create your own lit map, kind of play around with the tool. The more you use Litmaps, the easier it will be for you to understand what's happening, to be able to pick out the best papers, to be able to create your own literature review library, essentially. And it really is just so user friendly that it's something that I keep going back to whenever I'm searching or kind of helping students with their literature review. So if you have any questions, and I would love to answer it right now, there's anything to do with like writing a literature review, more generally, or using Litmap specifically, then please let me know. And yeah, I would love to kind of help out.
Great. Thank you so much, Amina. That was so, yeah, so interesting and with so much depth. And I think a lot of the listeners were leaving many comments and questions throughout. So this was really great. Let me just try to fix the view, or we can leave it like this. So, so there were many questions coming in. One early one, or one maybe about 5 minutes ago, that was really cool, was asking if you could recommend another AI tool that is very compatible with Litmaps for synthesizing research papers that they've gathered.
Okay, good one. And I think I must have answered your question, and I kind of go back to this slide. So like I said, these are complementary. So you wouldn't be able to do what you do on Litmaps on these tools, and you also wouldn't be able to do what's on these tools on Litmaps. So that's why I think they're complementary. So you can, once you found the research papers that you want to use, you can upload them into Unriddle, into Humata, Chat PDF, SciSpace. They do the same thing. You don't need to use all of them, just choose one. And then you can then synthesize and ask questions about them. So they are complementary in that sense. But you cannot go to any of these tools and just search for a research paper that's relevant. So you'd have to start at Litmaps, pull out your library, and then synthesize them with these ones. So I hope that was useful.
Great. And another one that was, yeah, really, it was a bit more in the beginning that you might also find really interesting is how to get ideas for literature reviews. I think this is more about picking research topics, figuring out, yeah, the premise.
Okay, good question. I will kind of answer it in kind of two answers, I guess. The first is that it depends if you're coming from, most people are coming from a course or university or a PhD program, so that literature review should be predetermined in terms of the topic. So you technically shouldn't be just randomly thinking of a random topic to write about. So what I would start off with is to make sure that you're on the right track is speak to a supervisor or professor or someone who you're working with to kind of determine what that could look like. Just not the specific topic, but what the area should be. But let's say you're trying to write something by yourself and you have a rough area. So let's go back to the one that I was writing about, the ethics in genetic engineering. That's a topic. Now, what I could do is I could try to find, as I said earlier, orphan papers. So I could try to find papers that don't have that much literature, or that don't have doesn't have that many kind of citations around it, is a bit of a lonely topic. So that might suggest that there is still a gap missing. So then that could be something that I write about. But I don't think there are many times that you're just told to write about something random. You usually are given a bit of a general topic, which you then can do some research and find gaps in. So I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. I think that makes a lot of sense. Another great question was the individual said, what if I already have my literature review chapter, but now I need to modify it? So I suppose using Litmaps or these tools and these methods, getting more in that cyclical process.
Good question. That's another another really good question. You guys are asking good questions. So I remember I did a masterclass on something like this quite recently, and I always say that doing a literature search never actually ends until you submit that thesis or the paper. Because let's say I do a search today and I write in the next month. I should really check again by the end of next month because things could have changed. Things could have been published that are more relevant, especially if you're someone that's doing a PhD. If you've searched for papers in year one and now you're writing in year three, a lot has happened in between. So it's a cyclical process in the sense that you're constantly searching, you're constantly looking just in case. But that's why I think the alerts that you get here on Litmaps is really good because even if you don't necessarily remember to check, you'll be told, oh, something new has been published that's relevant to your Litmap. So then it kind of prompts you to check. But either way, if I had already written it, what I would do is plug in my main paper just to make sure that I haven't missed anything out. So plug in your main paper, then look at the map, the lit map that has been created for you, and see whether you have touched upon all the relevant papers in your writing.
Yes, great information. Another good question was, well, there's many here, so I'm trying to prioritize, but one is, I'm a PhD student and struggling to finish literature review. They have a deadline of a month. So with a
Yeah.
month, how can they leverage this? Leverage this tool, I suppose, but also this workflow.
Yeah. Okay, good one. So 1 month, very doable. So let's break it down. So week one, we are going to spend just focusing on the literature itself. So we're going to essentially spend your time between Litmaps and a tool that will allow you to synthesize the literature. So that will allow you to actually kind of, like I mentioned earlier, Humata, things like that, that can allow you to read the literature quickly. So that's going to be week one, finding all your literature, organizing it, making sure it all makes sense, creating a bit of a like map of what your literature review will look like. Then week two and let's say week three will be actually writing. So just begin to write. Think of it as like a very rough draft. Don't try to perfect it. Don't try to get it perfect. But just begin to bring what you've looked at from the literature review, from the literature search even, put it into paragraphs, right? Then in the last week, you want to start to edit and refine that. So you might need to go back to Litmaps again in case there's some gaps. Usually there is. There are some gaps that you say, actually, I need to define this. I need to find some critique for that. You kind of go back to stage one again, determine what those are. Then you've got a few days to edit and you're good to go. 4 weeks is more than enough time to write a good literature review, especially now with the help of AI. Yeah, you can definitely write it in a month.
That's good to hear. And what I think this is great for your perspectives, given all the work you do. What makes Litmaps different from other AI tools or perhaps other tools you use?
Oh, it's a good one. For me, it's the fact that Litmaps is able to help me from the beginning. I think a lot of the tools that I play around with help you in the middle stage. And by middle stage, I mean like understanding the research paper, interrogating it, doing proofreading, paraphrasing, all of that good stuff. That's also really important. But I can't do that before I've done what Litmaps allows me to do. And there are only a few tools that are similar to Litmaps, but the reason why I prefer Litmaps over the others is firstly the personalization. I'm really able to create it as my own, and I'm really able to kind of modify the map that I'm given from the beginning to make it to a map that actually suits my research question the most. But then I can then say, right, I've got the foundation. Let me now go and write. So I think, there are loads of tools. I've played with tons and tons of them. And some are good at different stages. But I think you need the foundation to be right before the rest of your essay, thesis, whatever, flows easily. So that's why I think Litmaps really targets that first stage of writing, which is the research stage, which is why, yeah, it's my favorite when it comes to that that aspect.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, there's certainly plenty more questions, but unfortunately we're at the time. However, after the webinar, I will send a follow-up email and include many helpful links and resources I think that will address some of the other outstanding questions, especially if they're Litmap specific. And for any of these more generic questions, you can certainly check out Amina's platform, the social media channels, as well as the Litmap site, which has research resources as well. But I just want to wrap up by firstly making a quick note that at the beginning, it was awesome. Everyone can try to make a lit map, but Litmaps, we are a rapidly growing tool. And so this is the first time we tried like a live workshop with hundreds of people. So naturally the queue got very filled and many people couldn't
Oh,
make the map. I apologize.
oh no.
It's really, our free version is actually very reliable, very easy to use. So hop on a bit later today. I think the queue has already been cleared. Our CEO hopped on and fixed it. So I apologize for that again, but trust me, the free version, it works really well. You can do basically, like I'd say 80% of what we covered here on the free version. You can accomplish quite a lot, and it's usually pretty fast. And if it's not fast, you contact us. We are very easy to get in touch with and do very active support. But more importantly, this was an amazing educational presentation by Amina. I really thank you for sharing all of this. This was honestly probably one of the best Litmaps presentations I've ever heard, including all of mine. So you have a really awesome perspective because you can compare it in the much bigger picture of research. And I think that's really useful for everyone, especially for their day-to-day life. How do I use these things? So thank you so, so much for this. And thank you everyone for attending. Great. And I think we will wrap it up then at this, and I'll end the recording and be sending it out shortly. So thank you all so much again. Thank you, Amina.
Okay.
Okay, I think I just finished the stream. I always forget there's so many things
Yeah.
to manage here.